Welcome to a procurement podcast, The Reform Rundown, with your hosts Chris Robinson and Fleur Summers.
Over the course of this series, Fleur and I will be discussing some of the main themes and concepts surrounding the Procurement Act 2023 and what it will mean to the public sector ahead of launch. Fleur and I have a combined 40 years public sector procurement experience and will be using some of that experience to share our knowledge and insights around the Act itself.
So let's get into today's topic.
Welcome to episode 8 of a procurement podcast, The Reform Rundown, where we are joined today by another special guest. We have Spencer Hill of Icosa Ltd. Welcome, Spencer. Great to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to be here. And Kieran likened you both to Ant and Dec, which I thought was a bit off because they're two blokes. So it's nice to be on the Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton show today.
Even better.
So as we edge closer to go live and the sector busily ensuring themselves that they are business ready for launch, ourselves and our guests are going to discuss an activity which in reality could be done at any time. The fact that we have a new act for the sector looming only serves to provide greater necessity. That act is the Procurement Maturity Assessments.
But before we jump into today's main discussion, we just wanted to talk about a few notices covering important topics that have come up since our last episode. So, of course, one of the places to start is the outcome of the general election. Now, despite the change in government, the message we understand still remains the same. It is full steam ahead for the 28th of October, unless informed otherwise. Now, not one to speculate, but we do love a good gossip. With Parliament scheduled to go into summer recess very shortly and not to return until the 10th of September, one would assume any news around changes to the Act and its launch would have to be made very quickly.
Then, of course, we've got the latest set of guidance notes, which were released on the 9th of July, which means more reading for ourselves and the sector alike. Of course, now these include, but are not exclusive to, the various notices, of course, that we have now that the sector is going to be working within in terms of the confines of undertaking public sector procurements, mixed procurements, thresholds. I'm just thinking off the top of my head now, Fleur. Preliminary market engagement, guidance around technical specifications, and of course, again, in the most recent set of guidance notes releases, frameworks and dynamic markets, which actually is the next subject for episode 9.
Quite well timed in that, in terms of having that guidance document, so we can get reviewing of that and cover that as part of the next episode. But that is pretty much it in terms of the main news, in terms of updates as to where we currently are. Please do keep an eye out and join our LinkedIn group page for any further updates between now and episode 9.
So back to our guest. Welcome again, Spencer. Great to have you with us. For our listeners, do you want to give us a quick introduction as to your background and an overview as to the services that Icosa Ltd offers?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you both very much. So I'm going to do this in brought to you today by the number 18 in typical sort of Sesame Street style. But at 18, I joined MOD Civil Service, and I spent 18 years as an MOD civil servant. And strangely enough, procurement wasn't one of the things I did. I did year 2000 for the Quartermaster General. I did transformation of defence logistics. So a lot of sort of generic change type stuff and project management type stuff. So after 18 years, I left. And for the last 18 years, seriously, it's generally 18, didn't make this up for the podcast. For the last 18 years, I've been on the outside as a sort of external management consultant, supporting the public sector with the odd sort of bob back in to work as a local government procurement officer for a time, and a time as an illustrator as well, which was an interesting time in my life as well, where I decided to sort of make a go of this book publishing thing and then returned back to consultancy. So for the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years, I've been sort of at director level as a commercial director in various companies, doing the support of clients in this area. So now on the next 18 years of my life, the next chapter, I've decided to I've started out on my own. So hopefully it will be an 18-year period, so it'll keep neat. So when we do the podcast again in 18 years, we can talk about it. But yeah, I now am the sort of MD of Icosa UK, Icosa Ltd, and effectively the services that I provide, really, all the services that we provided in Icosa is very sort of the sort of standard sort of support stuff. I mean, when you look at my website, I've banged up SIP's procurement life cycle, because any of us that do that kind of work, we support everything around that cycle, don't we? I mean, we can go. I mean, I must admit, I've never been asked to dive into warehouses. That's probably the one side of the cycle I've not yet dived into. To dig out the how do you plan the best route for a forklift around a warehouse, but everything else, you know, is the kind of services that talk about pertinent to today. One of the things that I did a lot in those 18 years when I was a consultant is procurement maturity assessments or procurement reviews. So I must have reviewed every single local authority in Surrey, East Sussex, West Sussex, East of England, as well as many, many more housing associations, universities, colleges, etc., across the country in those 18 years. And quite often you'd be called in because you'd either be called in because procurement was slowing everybody down, or you'd be called in because procurement were in tears because everyone else wasn't helping them, or there'd be something that needed to. You're never called in because everything was hunky-dory, because that's not why we're there. So I've done a lot of assessments of procurement teams over that time with different slants for reasons for why to do the review, which is where we come back to the Procurement Act today, I suppose, is, you know, that this is another reason for doing a review. So my 18 years slot of review of consultancy has mainly been procurement reviews or procurement support.
So I guess just as like a side note, if you put all our time together in public sector procurement, that's quite significant, isn't it, in terms of like what me and Chris have, and then if we add yours in, Spencer, that's
exactly. Yeah, we're not going. Obviously, I know both your backgrounds in terms. We've all done. When you put the time in, it's that length of time where you'll have gone through everything before. You'll have seen most things before. And although the Act is new, it's not new to have to implement new regulations or a new approach.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like a big change. But for those of us who've been around for quite a long time, it's actually a big opportunity, in my opinion, to be able to do things even better than we were doing before. Because there's not a procurement officer I've met yet in all that time who hasn't always wanted to do the best for their organisation and the best for public spending. And that's what we're about. Even though we're now on the outside supporting them from external companies, we all have that public sector heart still. And I think that's what drives everything that we do. It drives what I know. It drives what you two do. It drives what I do.
Yeah, totally agree. So, considering what we've just mentioned with regards to procurement function maturity, do you want to just let us know a bit more about how Icosa can support in this regard and what your type of methodology and approaches are?
Sure. So the approach that I've designed, which is sort of as a result of all those reviews I've done over the years, because in the very early days it was spend analysis. I think Chris, you mentioned spend analysis as a preparation
tool. But
it
starts a lot, isn't it? Spend analysis.
You always start with the spend analysis. Otherwise, who do you know who your key buyers are? How do you know where your money is going, etc. But it started in the old days with spend analysis. What I've designed now is a model which takes a look at the organisation in. I've broken it into 6, and when you look at, there are many of these models around. Local government's assessment, I think, is broken into 6. I think the guidance from the government commercial function in April was broken into 5. So it's always a common sort of set of buckets, I think. And Fleur, we were talking about this, and you rattled off, you know, what you thought it should be, and straight away you came up with the same 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But what this is not something new in the sense of a structure to be able to sort of, in terms of not having something out there already, but it's about being able to be guided by somebody through a procurement review in terms of being able to do it for you. So my model is about, you know, making the most of your spending. You know, how compliant are you with the law, the legislation, regulations, which is quite pertinent right now. How well are your systems and processes working? You know, how are your planned policies and strategies supporting all the function that you're doing? The people skills, behaviours and awareness doesn't just focus on the procurement team. It's about the leadership team, the board, the key buyers, the legal team, the finance team. Everybody has to pull together, and the new Act is making that even more important. And then finally, most importantly, of course, is managing suppliers and contracts. Are you actually managing suppliers, and are you working with them in a partnership type approach, or are you hitting them with sticks and shouting at them loudly when something goes wrong? And from a contracts perspective, and I know Kieran talked a lot about this when he was on your show, you know, are they ready? Are they correct? Are they right? And he's been talking, I think, recently on LinkedIn about, you know, doing a contract template review to make sure everything's ready. So it's about delving into that part of your world as well. anyone listening to this will say, Spence, well, that local government provides that for free, and the guidance that they gave in April from government commercial function tells us all of that sort of stuff. Yes, it does, but what I do, what I can come and do is I can do it for you. So it's about being able to I've not yet met a procurement person who would normally be leading these things, who says, you know what, I've got a spare week, I don't know what to do with it. Whoever has that kind of time? And secondly, it's about going places where maybe you couldn't internally go yourself, and it's also about sometimes delivering messages that aren't necessarily going to be well received from the inside. As somebody who was a civil servant and local government officer for many years, it's a bit galling when a consultant comes in and says what that you could have said, but quite often it needs that external credibility or that external voice to be able to say, oh, I found this and you need to fix it, or this was brilliant and you need to do more of it. And let's be really clear, this model that I've got is positive and constructive. It's about coming in, looking around all these things and saying, this could be better, but this is amazing. Why aren't you not all doing this? This person over here in the environmental department is doing X, Y, Z. Why is everybody else not doing this? So it's about being able to produce a report, have a conversation, raise awareness. And I always used to call it the friendly virus. It's spreading the word of why procurement and commerciality is everybody's business, and why it's important that everybody gets involved, from leadership right the way down to people who are barely involved in the procurement process.
And I guess in very, very simple terms, it's around looking at where are we now and where do we need to get to, and then working out and how then do we get to where we need to get to. And I guess that's very timely in terms of like the Procurement Act and regulations, because you can look as to where are we now, where, like, in terms of a number of different things, policy and procedures, systems, those types of things. Where do we need to get to be compliant with the Procurement Act, and then how do we get there?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, in terms of, I'm going to reach for props, Fleur. I'm going to reach for props.
Oh,
so in terms of the way I do it now, because I've called my business Icosa, I use the platonic solids as a measure. You could 1 to 5. I find that it's like, why do you use 1 to 5 when you can get more exciting? But down the bottom end, the way I explain it is that if it's rudimentary and any of those functions we just mentioned are maybe right down the basic level, if you roll this dice, the best value you can get out of that is 4. That's about as much as you're ever going to get from a function that is designed with only sort of 4 sides. But if you have an organization which is performing, up this end, and this is the icosahedron, and I've named my business after it. When you roll this dice, you can get a value of 20, which is like 5 times the value of that other organization. This organization is multifaceted and it's performing at its top end. Everything's working together. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't met many of these. But I wouldn't be called in for many of these, would I? Because that's not why we're there. But they are out there. So for me, it's about measuring it and saying for each of those functions, then overall, where, like you just said, where are you right now? Where could you be? Where should you be? And that's really important for the Procurement Act, because when you start to look at where it's going, knowing where you are right now and where you absolutely need to be is really important, because it's about sort of thinking about that transition and saying well, we've already ticked all these boxes, we've got that sorted, but good grief, contract management has always been a problem for us, and now they're going to make us do these notices and they're going to make us report on it. What are we going to do to get ourselves to a standard that is ready for that at the beginning? So you've got to know where you are before you can know where you're going. And then you can start to work out, like you said, the transition. It's basic organizational development stuff. It's been around since consultants first went to the cave next door and said, I think you could probably light that fire slightly better than you're lighting it right now. And it'll be around for forever. Where are you right now? Where do you want to be? Where do you need to be? And from the Procurement Act's perspective, this is something you would do whether the Procurement Act was here or not. When I was doing it all those years ago, there was no Procurement Act driving you. There is a driver now, and you've definitely got to know where you are to know what the journey is going to look like to get yourself to minimum, but also to get yourself maybe aspirationally to being better or even being the best. Why not be the best? Why not take this opportunity to really focus? Exactly. Turn around to your organisation and say, right, we've got an opportunity here. We've got to do it anyway. Why don't we do it really, really well? Because the value we can drive out of this for our residents, tenants, customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, and whatever part of government you're in, is immense.
I think on the point of almost attempting or aspiring to be the best or the best version as an organisation can be in this regard, and kind of like a little bit of both a statement and a question then on this particular point here then. So to be absolutely clear, the success of an assessment, a review, call it what you will, and the quality of the data that comes from that is more than the responsibility of the procurement function, right?
Oh, good grief. Yeah, without a doubt. And this is the problem. The amount of times I've gone into organisations and they've either blamed the procurement team for being the blocker or legal. It's either legal, finance or procurement that normally get blamed. And everyone's sort of, they're not looking at themselves and thinking, as a leader of this organisation, am I actually taking this seriously? Have I got a procurement person at my head table? Have I got it part of my strategy? Do I genuinely think about this when I make decisions? Or do I sort of expect that it's going on somewhere in the organisation? You know, as a key buyer, as a key part of the organization, am I genuinely integrating this and making sure I'm working in conjunction with this super team to make sure everything is as good as it can be? Or am I trying to circumnavigate the rules because I'm a bit busy and I'm trying to get things done, you know, and I'm blaming people for getting in my way and then wondering why I'm not driving the best value or getting the best service or making my end customers as happy as they can be. And I think you're right, it is and always has been an organisation-wide responsibility. The great thing about the new Act for me is that it's forcing people to think that way. It's forcing people to remember there are 3 phases. It's forcing people to look at whole life approach to this. And that for me, people say to me, oh, good grief, this is so new. It's like, no, it isn't. It's been like this for decades.
It always was the same.
It's always been this way. If you were doing things, I say properly, that sounds judgmental, but if you're doing things as good as you could, and this for me is an opportunity for those people who've been desperately trying to get their organisations to come on board, and it won't just necessarily be the procurement team shouting. It might. I've often met key buyers who want the change. I've met leaders who want the change. You know, I've met financiers. I've met lawyers. There'll be different people with different views, but yeah, it's a whole organisation thing. Always has been, always will be.
I think my kind of hope is for the Act, and of course, as we're receiving more information around the guidance notices and organisations are getting themselves business ready for the 28th of October and beyond, is that the profile of procurement within these organisations, within the sector, will grow. And, you know, we often talk about these top table discussions and having procurement presence and representation at that. And I think hopefully from what we're reading and understanding and digesting from both the Act, the regulations and the guidance notices to follow, is that other functions and departments will start actively engaging in supporting these activities because it is for the greater good of the organisation and ultimately the public purse, I would suggest. Now, what the problem is, and we've all experienced it, is that when you've been a procurement officer for a long time, you start getting a bit embittered about the fact you might not be listened to, or you're seen as the blocker, or actually, yeah, I'm trying to be nice to you, but I do have to remind you that there are regulations that we have to stick to. I'm really, really sorry, but we can't do what you want to do. We can't just pick that person because you met them yesterday on the golf course, because there are rules and there are things around it. I'll do my very best to help you, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to keep you legal and keep you out of court. I remember having that conversation with somebody once where eventually I had to say, okay, let's get our suits on then, and we'll go to court, because that's where we're going next. Or we do things properly, and we don't want to have to bring that stick out. Sure. And on the other side, there are, people within the organisation at whatever level who are saying, good grief, why can't these people get out of our way? Why can't they just do what we want? Why can't we just do things the way we want to do it? They're slowing us down. They don't understand, insert thing here that we're trying to do. And it's about getting over that old, boring argument that's been around for too long. And, and we could sing the Oklahoma song, couldn't we? The farmer and the cowman should be friends. The point is, I couldn't, by the way, I don't know it well enough. I only know one line. But the point is, get over it. Get over yourselves, because the organisation itself and the value that is being driven, through the relationships with suppliers, etc., local economy, all the things that are linked to this are going to suffer if you don't stop this embittered argument of they're in our way, they don't understand. It's like, just get over it. Work together, because if you don't, World Commerce and Contracting, formerly IACCM, they've been talking for years about the hemorrhaging of value out of organisations, and I have seen it. You've seen it firsthand, where someone says, I don't actually know how much money we're spending on this, and you think, how can you not know there's money going out in that contract? They're not watching it, or they didn't do the procurement in a very sort of sharp way, or
You know, they just pick somebody who they've always picked, or whatever it is they might be doing. And you think, you know, they're saying 8.6% now, aren't they? I think they worked with Deloitte last year and they refreshed their number. 8.6% on average is being hemorrhaged out of an organisation through, they say, poor contracting, but it's wider than that. And 8.6%, you think about that for any organisation that we're talking about here, supporting, whether it be a small authority, a small housing association, or a government, central government body. 8.6%, and you could have that back, you know, but by doing things a bit better, working together as a team, you know. And this new act, I reckon it's got more opportunity and more possibility for that.
What's that saying? If you always do the same thing, you'll always get the same.
Yeah,
I think it's something like
we've
that.
always got. Yeah.
So like you say, this Procurement Act, and that's going to give a bit more flexibility to be able to do things slightly different. So yeah.
Just to kind of top of, sorry, Spencer, carry on.
I'm not suggesting that also, again, an old sort of view of procurement is, you know, that they are axe people and they're there to try and make savings and they're measured by such. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that value can come in many different ways, but I'm suggesting that there is an opportunity here through a procurement maturity model to be able to say, you know, how well are we doing right now? How well is this performing? There'll be bits that'll be really good. There'll be bits that can improve. There'll be bits that are way not good enough. And when you lie the act on top of it in terms of the prep for that, you can certainly say, right, these things need fixing faster than these things. But at the heart of this is an organisation that is trying to achieve a mission, and it won't without a commercial engine that is performing. And also there's money washing about. You know, how much, like Chris said, do a spend analysis. How much money are you spending in the market? What are you spending it on? Now imagine, I'm not saying draw a line under it and make the procurement people do it, but imagine that you could get a percentage of that back. And I know consultants have been promising that for donkey's years, which is why I don't link that to my model and say you will get back, you know, this much money back, because it's just not possible to say that without looking into contract terms and relationships and all that sort of stuff. And it happens over a period of time. But there's definitely value in there. There's value monetary, there's value compliance, and there's value from the point of view of an organization performing and doing what it's supposed to do in terms and satisfying its clients. So I mean, why would you not figure out where you are and then figure out how you could be better, you know, for the future? Why would you not do that?
Just to top and tail this particular point here, and the message I'm hearing continually around this then is, and you know, the procurement function is that and the act around it is that the drive across and the drive towards cross-functional team working, for example, when you consider finance with the payment compliance notices and the narrative relating to contract management, in the greater transparency will be required, and therefore more emphasis on subject matter experts to work alongside procurement colleagues. So as you say, Spencer, this is nothing new, but I think the Act provides that extra oomph, that extra emphasis to make this happen, make it possible.
Yeah, definitely. It's coming. Like you said at the beginning, the date's not changing, so it's still the 28th. It's coming. So somebody asked me the question the other day, what should my plan be from the 29th? So good grief. If you start working on this from the 29th, you are like
6 months behind.
Yeah, you're a little bit behind, because at that point you're reacting, you're not planning, you know, and you're going to find yourself having to create notices and review templates and squeeze things in. That's too late. But you should be doing it now. You certainly should be looking at your organization. You don't have to you can call me in if you like. This sort of review takes a few days, seriously, a few days to do at its most basic level. You can go way into depth, and I could talk to every buyer, and I could look at every plan policy. I could look at every contract you've got. Obviously, it would take longer, but at sort of a very quick level to be able to say, right, you're here, but and you need to be here, and you need to fix these things. It takes 3 days, so you know it's not going to take you long to figure out where you are. Crack on, get on with it, do it, get started, do it yourself, or bring someone in to help you, or form an internal team. Whatever you do it now, because you know that you haven't got much time. What day is it today? 12th of July.
12th of July.
We're recording this, so
Summer holidays, and then September, and then October.
That's right.
Do it now. You know, and even if all you do is you start with a spend analysis and a conversation, even if the procurement person is asked to come and to speak to a group of people, like, you know, a group of leadership people, if they're not already in that group, which I would hope they were, and says, we are currently at this state, our contracts register looks like this, you know, our supply base looks like this, our spend looks like this, you know, our awareness level. look like this. My team is staffed or not staffed for this. That sort of basic stuff that this will wield out from looking at evidence. I go through evidence and talk to people. Get ready now, because otherwise it's going to be a really tough November for some people trying to catch up with some of this stuff. And get ahead of it a little bit. And don't forget the suppliers as well. People quite often forget that relationship is just as important as the lawyers, the financiers. I've worked with every one of those relationships in my time, as I'm sure you two have, where we've either been sent out to suppliers to fix it, and then find out we have to go back and fix where we came from. It wasn't anything the supplier's fault at all. Or can you go and sort out legal because they're really slow, and you find out why that, it's always two sides to every story. I've sat in workshops with finance about payment processes and how they join together with procurement and stop fighting about who's responsible for what part of the invoicing process and supplier setup process. And in leadership teams, we try to explain to them that you do need to understand what these people do that work for you, because you can't run this organization unless you do, actually. And I don't personally think that future CEOs should be given the keys to their office until they've actually been through some sort of procurement sort of function and understood it. It's just not acceptable to not know how it works anymore. It's too much at the heart of what an organization does. Especially as money gets tighter and things get more difficult, and and more is expected of you. How are you going to superpower yourself up to achieve this? Commercial approach, procurement, function, multifunctional team. So where are you? How can you be better?
So I think just in that we've answered what my next question was going to be, which was around how soon should public procurement organisations look to undertake these type of maturity assessments. And I think in terms of the Procurement Act, it's now to get ready for September or October. Don't wait until October to start planning. Start doing that now. So I think that's one of the key messages that we've taken from that just quick conversation there, that this is the type of work that organisations, authorities need to start looking at doing now.
Without a doubt. And I would be very surprised if most procurement teams, and maybe they're wider, because quite often there's a team of the procurement person, a buyer or two that's usually the good buyer, that's always the one that's on side and doing their best to be part of the function. Legal, and finance, quite often there's this little group of people. They'll already know, where they are with most of this stuff. But obviously, from my perspective, the advert for me is, if you need some help, or you haven't got the time, or you want you want something that's presented that you can then push in front of your board or your leadership team, that says this has got a badge on it and it's got numbers and it's got these fancy sort of, we're being measured on on these platonic solids. If that's what you want, then myself and many others obviously can come in and do that for you if you haven't got time to do it. But do it now. Get that first view now, because then you'll be able to say, how ready are we? And what does ready mean? Does ready mean just barely compliant and just squeeze through and carry on ticking along and hope nothing bad happens? Or does ready mean a chance to improve, like we said a minute ago, in terms of actually this is our opportunity to do that thing we never did, to upgrade our contracts register, to form that procurement function network, to do the awareness training for our buyers, or whatever. And the amount of knowledge and stuff that's out there for free, it's immense. It's immense. There's no excuse for not knowing. The guidance was released in April. I'm looking at it in front of my screen right now, that came from government commercial function, and it quite clearly says, it doesn't go into depth we've just gone into, but it does say 5 steps, so do it now, and either get help or do it yourself, but do it now.
Absolutely. So an organisation undertakes their assessment, they get the outcome from that, they get and they devise a strategy in terms of a way forward. I suppose the next question or point I'd like to ask Spencer in regards to this is, what does continual monitoring and maintenance of that post the completion of the assessment look like, and ultimately how much work is involved in doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, once you've set it up, the answer is minimal, but yeah, you're right. This isn't a one shot, get ourselves ready, walk away, and then and then forget about it. The best, I mean, good grief, I mean, dashboards, business excellence models, I mean, whatever, balanced scorecards, whatever, however far back you want to go to all these models that have existed for so long that even I was a young man when some of them were being talked about. Implement something that is a constant measure of the key factors of the way the procurement function is running. So I think we did a client that we worked on in the past. We created a dashboard that was drawing information, and it was able to say, this is, how many procurements are currently going through right now, and the sort of value, and the organization, part of the organization that's dealing with it. This is the sort of value of contracts we've got running, and the sort of, and how they're doing. This is sort of spend we're talking about, this, and being able to sort of maybe have some form of a dashboard that is the information there, and all you've got to do is plug into these systems to be able to draw the information out. However you do it, whether you do it like that, or you create something like you used to as a kid with a cornflake box and the milk tray, empty milk tray packets, it doesn't matter, but have something that is a measure that can go to a leadership team to say, how are we doing, and constantly keep an eye on it, so you can see how well things are going. This is not just for the Procurement Act, this is for life, and that's how you should be monitoring. This is an essential function of your organization. It's an essential part of your balanced scorecard, or your dashboard, or your business excellence model, or whatever you want to use. It's not just for now, it's for life.
And I guess for some of the actions, you're not gonna do it in one big bang, are you? You're not gonna go from where you are to where you need to get to in one big step. It's going to be a gradual process. Well, we're now here, and you need to have that sort of processes in place, or reviews in place, to monitor how you are doing and where you're getting to. Because then you can be, well, we've moved from here, we're now here, and etc. So yeah, it's about having that continuous review, isn't it?
And measures of success as well. There are many ways of measuring success. You could decide that there are certain things we can say, right, okay, we're no longer on fire. There's a nice measure of success. We're no longer at the risk of challenge, or this is now working well. We know our supplier base. We've got our contracts ready. The basics are in place. You get yourself to basic level, but why not aim for a SIPS award? In terms of
accreditations,
in terms of being able to say to yourself, we've achieved this, and by next year or the year after, we want to be able to win a SIPS award for either for our team or for our project, or whatever it might be. Or maybe it is we want to achieve some sort of an ISO standard. Maybe we want to achieve something. Maybe we want to measure something. But like you say, there are levels of degrees, as there always are in transformation. You sit down, you work out where you are, you look at where you want to be, you get a plan, and then you look at that plan, and that plan will have multiple strands on it, and you say, right, okay, we're going to start working along it, and you should then be measuring, where are we now, how are we doing in terms of where we said we would be. 20th of October is brilliant because it gives you gives everybody a
line in the sand.
When I've done it in the past, it's been like, all the hundreds of organisations I've done it for, that's really important, and it's the appetite at the time of the people who've commissioned it, all been commissioned upon them. This is different. We've all got the same date. I'm not saying you have to be super duper by the 28th, but there's a certain level that every organisation has got to be at. You're going to have a pipeline, otherwise you can't do. For organisations with over 100 million, but anyway, you should have a pipeline. You should know your forward procurement plan anyway. How on earth are you managing it if you don't have that in place? You should have a contracts register, which in turn should have a series of contracts so you know where they are, that they can be accessed. The amount of times where we've had to dig things out of drawers, or I think we'll have to go to the supplier to ask for that contract, and it's like, oh my, that's so embarrassing. So get the basics in place first. You're right, Fleur, there's levels of, for each of those things we talked about, whether you look at my 6 or you look at the LGA's 5, or whatever you look at in terms of the maturity and transformation, and measure it. Definitely, it's continuous. It's no different to any other part of the organisation. The difference is the light's been shone on it, and it really feels like when it's first started getting talked about, we probably didn't think it was going to be this meaty. We all sort of talked about hoping it, but it is, and it's brilliant. I think it's an astounding opportunity to do better.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think we might have touched on some of these bits as part of these conversations, but obviously resources are a key challenge within the public sector. It always has been. And the Act is already requesting them to do things differently, get to grips with new approaches in terms of tenders, new notices, all the different requirements that are coming out. But why for you is a procurement maturity assessment so important? And I think we might have touched on it, but let's just recover.
Firstly, it gives you the scale of the task and the complexity of the
Yeah.
task, because not everyone's the same. So you can't just say you are a second tier local authority, so therefore you're probably spending this much and therefore you've got these problems. You can't say that. You're a housing association of this many units. You can't say that. You've got to be able to go in and look at your situation and say, what are we dealing with right now? How are we procuring? What are we in the middle of? What are we managing? And what's our situation? And that's the first thing, is to work out the scale of the task. And then you've got to look at the function that you've got. And I don't just mean the procurement person, I mean the wider function around it in terms of the awareness and the capability. And you've got to be able to say to yourself, is that enough? Is that working well enough? I mean, do I even have a procurement person? I've been in plenty of places where there wasn't one, and they're trying to use the head of audit as the head of procurement, and they've managed to find somebody somewhere who's, who didn't run fast enough that day, and they got nabbed to be the procurement person. Or they're all doing it. They're all doing it in their own way. And we laugh because we've worked in organisations where they were all doing it, and there was no central procurement person to do it. And that's the first thing, is to say, what's the scale and complexity of the task that we have ahead of us, not even counting the Procurement Act. I mean, just generally, what do we have to deal with it, and is that enough? And if the answer is no, and we need something small and temporary, the contract interim consultancy market is massive, with talented people out there, me, you two, and many others who are ready to come in and help, temporarily or for a period of time. But then on top of that, maybe you need to expand your team, maybe you need to change your team, maybe you need to upskill your team, maybe they've not got enough qualifications or the right training or the awareness. And I don't just mean the procurement person, I mean everyone around as well. Because we should all be, as aware, there's a minimum level of awareness. And I remember doing roadshows inside Orbis, so it's Brighton Council, Surrey Council, and East Sussex Council, to get people to understand the new procurement standing orders that I'd written for them, and getting more than the procurement team to turn up, so that you were talking to more people, so that you can say, it's not only the procurement team that need to read the regulations and read standing orders, you all need to understand it. Admittedly, they've got the ultimate responsibility, but you all need to understand it. And most times you go and do reviews like this, and you talk to people out in the bazaars, they haven't read them. They haven't read the procurement standing orders, and they certainly won't have read the regulations, because they don't see that as their problem. It's everybody's problem. It's just that they have a specialist who's particularly responsible and particularly knowledgeable. So yeah, from a resource perspective, getting back to the point, I did tell you I was going to talk non-stop and boast. And Chris knows, he's experienced this before. The point is that you've got to look at the resource you've got and decide what you need to be able to operate and what you need to be able to get through the transitional hump. And it may well be that you're going to have to get in some interims or some consultants to help you through the transition or the initial period. But that's perfectly normal and perfectly acceptable to get you where you're going to go, because these are busy people.
We've talked obviously about the Act, and now we've identified this as an ideal opportunity, and there's a lot of aspirations within the Act, and that certainly supports the narrative of what we've been discussing today. But when you think about an assessment, and it'll bring the ability to adopt innovative approaches, assess supply chain suitability, and ultimately determine how well they are spending public finance, which is what it's all about at the end of the day. But for you, Spencer, what would be the main benefit of a public procurement organisation undertaking an assessment?
I think the first thing is to truly know yourself, and to know yourself and have a common understanding of where you are right now. Because when I go into organisations and do this, everybody knows where they are, but they've all got a different view. So the leadership team will know where they are, and they'll tell you quite seriously, we know where we are. But then when you actually work it out, everyone's got a slightly different personalized view of where they are. So what the reason for doing an assessment, getting everyone involved and doing a single report, is to say everyone needs to look at this, because this is where you are. So everyone can look at that and say, we all now know and have a common understanding about where we are right now, what the challenges are, what the good bits are, because we might not actually recognize that there's somebody deep down in that in part of our organization that's doing a superb job managing a supplier, but no one knew because no one asked her, and she's been doing it for years and no one knows. So the most important part of this is not just to know where you are, but have a common understanding organization wide, top to bottom, of where you are.
Totally agree. So I think this is like one of our last questions. So give us your top 3 tips when it comes to public procuring organisations getting themselves ready for go live.
I suppose the first part for me is to actually take your temperature and work out and figure out where you are right now. Actually do that. Whether you do that in a meeting or whether one person sits down and puts a brief into someone else, I'd rather they didn't do that because you have jaded views. But the first thing is, top tip is to actually figure out where you are right now and take your temperature, your organizational temperature. The second tip really is to think hard about transition, because we're talking about the Procurement Act 2023. We're talking about the fact that there's not going to be a massive burning of PCRs 2015, because they're going to still
transition
be applying,
period.
Yeah, they're still going to be applying to all the stuff that's already procured and is in place. It's going to get a bit complicated in places, but not massively complicated. So think about that transition and think about, do you want to get this procurement done now or do it later? And what is it going to look like? I know Kieran talked about this on his appearance about that really clever idea about coding contracts. 2015 versus 2023. Really clever. And I know you didn't take the credit for it, but really clever, because you'll then immediately be able to know when you pick it up, the team will know, right, we know what we're doing with this. Well, Regulation 72, section, you'll be able to sort of straight away get to it and sort it out. So when you do, the second thing is to think about transition and really think hard about, what are you going to do now versus what you're going to do in the future, and be really clear about that. And the third thing is really, and it sounds really just get on with it. Stop talking. Stop procrastinating. Because I've been a local government officer and I've been a central government officer. I know how good we are at talking. I know how we love to talk and think about things, and let's do some more talking. There's a whiteboard. Let's go and fill that whiteboard with more thinking. No, you've got to get on with it. I know it's much more easy to talk about it, but the time for talking was a year ago. 6 months ago, the time for talking seriously and putting things into action. At this point in time, it's time for action. So you take your temperature, sort out where you are right now, think hard about the transition, because that is really important in terms of how you're going to manage this period where there's going to be this double act in place type thing going on, and then just crack on and do it. Just really seriously, call somebody in. If you haven't got the time to do it and you really don't know what to do, then that's why people like me and you and others exist. I can come in and do this. I mean, with sort of 12 hours notice, whatever, 24 hours notice, I can be in. 3 days later, it can be done. So it's that kind of thing, an external organization. And I said it, there's plenty of sunshine for everyone out there. There's plenty of externals with these kind of skills who can come in and either run a model of their own like I've got, or they can run the LGA model, or they can run the start from the framework of government commercial function. But do it, get on with it. Take your temperature, think about transition, move,
act.
Yeah, time is now.
Yeah,
excellent. So I think that's everything that we've got time for today. We just want to say a massive thank you to Spencer for joining us on this podcast. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I think it's been a really good discussion in terms of getting ready for the Act, procurement maturity assessments, and everything that public sector authorities need to start considering now. So make sure to check out Spencer's LinkedIn page and keep up to date with everything that he's doing. And as Chris mentioned at the very start of this podcast, our next episode is going to be on framework agreements and dynamic markets. It is a much promised episode that we have said we will do quite a few times, but we really will be doing it now. We've got the guidance document that has come out. So make sure to keep an eye out for episode 9. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.
Fantastic having you with us, Spencer. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye for now.